Scorpio from the Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. Happy to have you on the platform, my man.
Thank you, my brother. Peace out, man. It's good to be on the platform. All right.
Yeah, man. Congratulations, man, on the Lifetime Achievement Award at the Grammys, my man.
Oh, man. Thank you, man. Thank you. That was definitely something that wasn't expected. You know what I mean? Came out the blue. You know what I mean? To be honest, it's not nothing that we was thinking about. So it's always good to get, acknowledgement for your contributions, especially for hip hop. So it's definitely nothing but love.
Yeah, man. We had your man's man, Melly Mel. A few weeks ago, I did an interview with Melly Mel, and he talked about how he met Tupac. He talked about Tupac trying to help him get a deal before Tupac passed away. He talked about the whole beef between Tupac and Biggie. He gave his opinion on who was greater out of Tupac and Biggie. That went viral. Everybody went crazy over that, man.
Right, right,
So with that being said, man, we got you on the platform, man. I want to get your point of view.
right.
How did you meet Tupac?
We met Tupac. Actually, me and Mel was together. We was at the House of Blues, and we was at the side door trying to get in, ready to get in, and security was kind of like, believe it or not, they was kind of fronting on us. We were just standing there. You know what I mean? Sometimes they just want to have you just stand there so they can just watch you for a minute, whatever. But then Pac came, coming across the street. He just parked his Rolls Royce, you know what I mean? Rolls Royce or Bentley, one of them two, that he had at the time. And, coming through with his little bop, you know what I mean? He had his little crew and all of that. We gave him the head nod, yo, what's up, Pac? You know what I mean? He spoke to us. And then, as soon as security seen him, and even though we were standing right here, and they were every day like, yo, everybody get out the way, Pac, Pac, Pac. So, you know what I mean? Pac just looked at us, and he was like, nah. He said, no, you let them in first. So he let us in, you know what I mean, before he got in with his crew. He made sure that we got in, you know what I mean? That's the first time we ever really, met Pac, just on a one-on-one. And, we knew him like everybody else through the music and, from a distant, peace signs, different thing. But that's the first time we had interaction. And he actually got us in the club. You know what I mean? He got us in the club. He told his whole crew stop, because his crew, they was ready against the mob. And he was like, they get in before I get in. And that's how we met Pac, in the House of Blues.
Yeah. So take me through that night, man. What went down that night, man, at the House of Blues?
I mean, that night was, to me, was an incredible night. At that point, me and Mel, see, we left New York because, believe it or not, at some point, New York fronted on a lot of classic hip hop artists, even ourselves. So that was the reason why we couldn't get nothing popping, no music, no radio play, no anything like that. So, you know what I mean? We one time we did a show and we linked up with Ice-T and he said, yo, man, y'all come on, if y'all could get out there and yada yada, you know what I mean, and set yourself up, you know what I mean, that we could record in his studio and stuff, you know what I mean? So that was the initial reason why we went to move to LA, you know what I mean, to start to record some music with Ice-T, you know what I mean?
So New York wasn't showing y'all no love, so
nah,
y'all was in Cali. The funny thing about that, at that time you had the whole East Coast, West Coast thing going on.
Yeah.
Tupac and Biggie.
Well,
and the funny thing about that is, y'all was in Cali and Tupac was showing y'all love.
No doubt. We was there actually before that really kicked off. So we was there like around 2-3 years. So by that time we was mobbing around. We didn't move out there in the middle of the East-West Coast beef. We was already out there. You know what I mean? But, to your point, yeah, absolutely. In the middle of that, definitely Pac always showed love because, he made it clear that it wasn't about the East Coast. You know what I mean? That was the thing that the papers did to sell papers. He was talking about people Pacific, and the crew Pacific. They made the East-West Coast beef. You know what I mean? We knew a lot of cats that was from the East Coast. And you know what I mean? And they was kind of nervous being out there, I ain't got to say no name because I don't want to throw cats under the bus. But it definitely, if I say their name, you'll be surprised. Like, nah, they got up out of there. You've seen a lot of cats that stayed, though, held it down.
Yeah, man, you got, a narrative that's always pushed when it comes to Tupac that he didn't like New York and he didn't like New York rappers. So that's funny right there.
Nah, that's real funny because believe it or not, you know, and I'm quite sure you heard, you know, just to prove that it wasn't a East and a West Coast beef, he was doing this album called One Nation. You know what I mean? And One Nation was going to be like, you know, like a lot of the West Coast rappers with the East Coast rappers coming together, showing like, yo, listen, we still One Nation. I just got a problem with them. You know what I mean? I got a problem with Biggs and Puff and whatever. So, he, you know, that's how, you know, he was really trying to mend that because he didn't like the narrative. You know what I mean? He didn't like the narrative at all. You know what I mean? Of him just saying like, he don't like the East Coast. I mean, everybody know he was born and raised in the East Coast. When Pac showed us, like I said, when he got us in the club and showed us so much love, you know what I mean? You know, I'm a businessman. I like to think I'm a businessman. So a bell went off. I'm like, yo, he's like one of the first cats that was current, you know what I mean? Like hot, you know what I mean? Current, and showed us love on that level. So after a while, I mobbed through the club, you know what I mean? And walked up on him, you know what I mean? Got a number and this and that, because, you know, he was doing him. And believe it or not, we were still doing us, you know what I mean? So the very next day, I gave him a call. I said, yo, Pac, I told him straight up, you know what I mean? Because I was the one that was constantly dealing with Pac, you know what I mean? You know, far as, you know, just getting a deal with me and Mel. See, I was the one that was always doing the calling and all that. And I told him, man, I'm like, yo, everybody basically fronting on us, you know what I mean? We still love hip hop. Still would love to get in hip hop. Is there anything that you can do probably to help us, you know, to get back in the game? And he told me, you know, he said, yo, Scorp, on the real, I'm so busy right now, you know what I mean? But if there's anything that you can do by using my name, just do it, and I'll co-sign it. I'm like, really? He said, yes. As soon as he told me that, I say the very next day, I started getting on the phone. Boom, boom. Yo, Pac said that he'd produce our album. You know what I mean? He said he'd produce our next album, our next album. Matter of fact, the first person I called, they was like, get out of here. I'm like, yo, for real. He said, yo, if you could get Pac on the phone, we'll give you $300,000. Got him on the phone. Said, yo, what's up? Yeah, I'm going to do it. Blah, 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 blah. Hung up. Bang. Then Pac called me back. And then he said, yo, check this out. This is what we're going to do. He's going to give us $300,000. I don't even want no money. I don't want no bread. All I want is like you and Mel take $100,000, give the Outlaws $100,000, and use the other $100,000 for the studio. You know what I mean? And that's what was really about to go down. You know what I mean? As a matter of fact, we already started to do, you know, to slowly, you know, produce our music with the Outlaws, because we had did one record together. You know what I mean? That was going to be part of everything, called How Many Shots Does It Take? You know what I mean? With us and the Outlaws, Melly Mel and Scorpio and the Outlaws. You know what I mean? So that's how real Pac was. He didn't even want no money. You know what I mean? And he was on the phone with real dude, gonna give us the paper and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, man. And y'all did another song called Fright Night, right?
Fright Night. That's How Many Shots Does It Take? Yeah.
Okay.
That was the hook. How many shots does it take? But it's called Fright Night. Yeah.
So the first time y'all met Tupac was at the House of Blues. The first time when Outkast and LL Cool J was performing. The second time y'all met Tupac at the House of Blues, that was the night Tupac performed with
Snoop.
Snoop and the Dogg.
Yeah. And that was after at that point we had already recorded Fright Night. You know what I mean? So then he came up, you know, he told us like, yo, I heard the song. It's crazy. Blah, blah, blah. He gave us props. And then, you know, obviously he went and performed. So that's why even at the, you know, if anybody see that performance on YouTube or whatever, you hear at the very end, yo, I like to give a big shout out to Scorpio and Melly Mel, the OGs is in the building. I like to give a shout, you know, they kept saying that.
Yeah,
you know?
Tupac and Corrupt both gave y'all a shout out.
Yeah, because at that point, we had a little relationship. We started recording, and you know what I mean.
Right. So take me through that night, man. Y'all being at the House of Blues, Tupac performing, then the Dogg Pound performing.
Well, you know, that night was I got a front, not for us, but it was an intense night, because Pac was still on 100, you know what I mean? He still was tight, you know what I mean, about Biggs and all of that. You know what I mean? And to be honest, even though Pac was tight, you know what I mean, and he was going at it, Snoop was still trying to keep the peace. You know what I mean? Because he was like, you know, because he said something to the effect like, yo, you know what I mean? Yo, it ain't like we got, you know, distaste for the East Coast. Matter of fact, the record that we did, LALA, you know what I mean? That's from Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. They getting that money. We ain't even getting the money like that. You know what I mean? So he was trying to send the energy out there like, basically, if we had so much funk with them, why would we use their shit? Not us from our group itself, but yes, anybody from the East Coast. So Snoop was always that dude, man. You know what I mean? Like the way he is now, you know, he always was like ahead of his time, like just being an ambassador. You know what I mean? Trying to keep that, like, nah, man, yo, we love them dudes, you know? And you know what I mean? And even though they was on the same level, same label, excuse me, he still wanted to keep that, like, you know, we can't, like, guess, turn the whole coast against each other.
How you feel about some of the comments Tupac made on stage that night when he said that he had relations with Faith Evans?
Well, you know, at the end of the day, I look at it like, first of all, at that point, you know what I mean, being that we was vibing with Pac, we knew Pac a little more than Biggs at that, you know, at that point, even though we met Big, you know, through our show we had on in New York called the Mike Tech Show. And that's the first time we met Big. He came through our show. But, you know, it's not that I can say, you know what I mean? I don't see Pac as being just a liar, you know what I mean? So if he said it, you know, it have to have something to it because, you know, people definitely hold your feet to the fire, like prove it. So, you know, I don't have the proof, but I'm quite sure if he said it, it should be, you know, something to it. You know what I mean? Like I said, he didn't come off as a lie. He always was real genuine as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, man. So you being from New York, man, how did you feel about the whole Quad Studio incident where Tupac got shot and set up?
Well, obviously, I mean, you know what? And at that point, I didn't even know Pac, but I was a super fan of Pac. You know what I mean? He was like, you know, one of our brothers, you know, in the music, you know what I mean? So definitely it hurt, you know what I mean? Because especially when somebody's coming to your house as a guest. It's like if you have a cookout and somebody come to your house and something happened at your house in your backyard, you can't help, even if you don't have nothing directly to do with it, but you definitely feel like I could have did something better, you know, I should have protected something better. So that's where his mentality was coming from. You know what I mean? I think he's like, yo, listen, no matter who it was or who ran up on me, this was your city. You should have known something. That's where I think a lot of his anger came from towards Biggs.
Bingo, 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 man. You get it, man, because a whole lot of people, they try to push the narrative that Tupac blamed Biggie for the setup, but he never did. He just said that he felt like Biggie knew something about it, and he felt like, you know, you saying that, it's your city. You say you run stuff in your music. You say you run New York and all that.
Exactly. So. You know, and like if Big was a type of a rapper, like somebody, I'm just gonna use any name, like a Q-Tip or something like that, whereas their music was just so different. You know what I mean? And it happened, and the same thing happened in the studio. I don't think Pac would have held Big, held a Q-Tip feet to the fire like that. But being that Big narrative was like Frank White, king of the city, nothing move without me. So it almost like he got condemned by his own words.
Exactly, man. I mean, that was the persona he was pushing, and you know, that was Tupac thing. So, yeah, man, I'm happy you brought that up and you get it, because like I said, I mean, over the years, man, you got people that keeps getting it confused, and they keep saying that Tupac blamed Biggie for, you know, the setup, and he never did. So
he never did, and I think that's the only thing that where I think a lot of, just like you said, people get it way confused. You know what I mean? He's just saying, man, look, you can't come off like that. Say you the king of the city and all of that, and something happened, and all of a sudden you don't know. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, man. So when the whole beef between Tupac and Biggie was going on, how did y'all feel? Like when it got to the highest degree, where it was like a whole East Coast, West Coast thing going on. You had magazines pushing it.
Yeah.
You
know what? You know, that's like, to be honest, it was like, we East Coast dudes to the core. I just want to start it there. We East Coast dudes to the core. But at that point, East Coast turned their back on us. You understand what I'm saying? And because they turned their back on us, don't please, in this interview, don't get it twisted. It ain't like we sided with the West Coast. You understand what I'm saying? But they turned their back on us. So it wasn't like, you know, oh man, it's the East Coast. You know what I mean? How could they go after them like that when we basically got shunned from the East Coast? And at that point, we was living on the West Coast. So it was, okay, we from the East Coast. There's some West Coast shit going on. But we living on the West Coast and we getting all our love from the West Coast. You know what I mean? At that point, you know what I mean? We was running around with everything. I mean, Dr. Dre, you know, was inviting us up to a studio. We was about to do a deal with Dr. Dre. You know what I mean? You know, he you know what I mean? At one point, we were staying out there, and Dr. Dre took care of where we were staying. He was taking care of, you know, me and my Melly Mel Hotel, you know, for around a month and a half or two. And we was trying to put something together. You know what I mean? In the club, I met Dre. Blah, blah, blah. Yo, nothing but love and respect. Swap numbers. Same scenario. I give him a call. You know, I didn't say nothing to him. He was like, yo, Scorp, yo, let me meet you. You know what I mean? Blah, blah, blah. So we had a conversation. And matter of fact, I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if I went up to the studio by myself and met with him. Matter of fact, I think it was something like that. And then he said, yo, man, we definitely want to do something with you. Blah, 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 blah. I came back to the hotel. We staying in the Orchid Suites. And told Mel, he's like, yo, Dre definitely want to do something with us. Then the next time we went up there, me and Mel, and then he pulled me aside and was like, yo, who's your lawyer? Blah, blah, blah. So it was about to go all the way down. You know what I mean? And for some reason, when we was dealing directly with Dre, it was no problem. You know what I mean? When we had to start going through his middlemen, it became a problem. You know what I mean? And then I think one time, Dre gave us a song to do, right? He gave me and Melly Mel a song to do. And it actually had some of the lyrics on it, too. And instead of us doing it the Furious Five way or the back and forth like how we do our stuff, we was trying to sound rap it more like how Dre was doing it. And I think, and when we couldn't get it down pat, you know what I mean? Because that's not our cadence. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of people that was in this studio and this camp were basically like, yo, they whack, yo, they can't get, you know what I mean? Because we couldn't get it. You know what I mean? It didn't come off right. That's like Dre trying to do one of our joints. It was a party night, everybody was breaking. He can't, you know what I mean? He ain't gonna be able to have it in the pocket like that. You understand what I'm saying? So when me and Mel did that song, you know, it wasn't in the pocket. And we know we messed up. When we came back to the hotel, you know what I mean? We was basically like kicking ourselves. We was like, why we didn't do it the way we do our stuff? You know what I mean? And so I think on top of us not bodying the song and his people around hating on us a little bit, you know what I mean? It never really happened after that.
Who's the people you referring to?
Well, I mean, you know, you got to understand, Dr. Dre, that's right when he had left Death Row. So he had his private studio. So, you know what I mean? So you have, when I'm talking about, you having like around 10 artists constantly always in the studio around Dre and they jockeying for position. You understand what I'm saying? So when you get, and most of them was from the West Coast. So they might have looked at it like, yo, Dre gonna pay some attention to these cats. You know what I mean? I'm saying? So they, you know, not saying that was it, but I'm quite sure it had some type of effect. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Because after a while, when I'll call up there and say, yo, can we speak with Dre? And then after a while, it was like, well, you know, whatever you need, you just speak to me. I'm like, okay, blah, blah, blah. Send a message and call back 2 days later, 3. I mean, so we could, listen, we might not know a real good deal in our career because we haven't had many real, like, solid, good deals. But we know when somebody's shunning us. We know when somebody is trying to two-step us or it's a fucked up situation. So that vibe was coming back. Cause we don't live that more. We don't have more bad deals than good deals. So we more familiar when something is going left. You know what I mean? I'm like, we've been here before. You know, a real good deal might hit us upside the head. We might not know it because we haven't had that many deals. And you know what I mean? I'm not saying that because I'm proud to say that. I'm just telling you the truth.
All right, here we go.